In recent years, there's been a growing trend of replacing turf grass with native plants. It conserves water and eliminates chemical usage, which saves money while creating a biodiverse habitat that supports pollinators and wildlife. It also involves less yard maintenance. Aldersgate United Methodist Church in Lincoln turned its 2-acre lot into a prairie garden. Church member and garden curator Steve Schaefer spoke with me about this amazing transformation.
What sparked the idea for this?
It was really somewhat accidental. The church had a little bit of money set aside to do some landscaping, and at that time the concept was probably more the traditional foundation plantings. But I happened to attend a seminar put on by, then it was called the Nebraska Statewide Arboretum, now it's Plant Nebraska, that was focused on sustainable landscaping. It just seemed like an intriguing concept.
Had you had any prior experience with landscaping?
Not beyond just the normal landscaping a person does around their house.
Can you tell me how long has this garden been in the works and how has it changed over time?
The first major planting was the spring of 2017. And over that time, we've eliminated 80% of the grass and replaced it with landscaped areas. But I think we've planted 135 trees, 500 or 600 shrubs, and a few thousand perennials. And those numbers change every year.
What has been the biggest challenge transforming from a lawn of grass into more of these native prairie plants?
For me, the biggest challenge is understanding what plant would work best in a location. But what really started was we purchased a bloom box from the Statewide Arboretum. And that's a program where you describe your situation, the lighting conditions, the moisture, the soil, and the Statewide Arboretum will recommend a collection of plants that will be well suited for that spot and for a relative pittance.
And you've got trails, trees, little wetlands and drainage areas and prairie plants all over the place.
We've tried to put in native plants as much as possible since they're the best suited to be a food source for birds and pollinators.
Do you recommend that other people try something like this with their lawns?
I think it's worth considering. If one is concerned about declining habitat for wildlife, everybody who owns property can play a role in addressing that.
Plant Nebraska, formerly the Nebraska Statewide Arboretum, helped Aldersgate Gardens take root with expertise, plants, and funding. Bob Henriksen, Horticulture Program Coordinator with Plant Nebraska, explains why more Nebraskans are choosing to go native.
I've been noticing a movement to transform lawns into these native prairie plantings. What do you think is inspiring that? Why are people interested in that?
I think people are hearing about, wildlife being in trouble, right? They're hearing about the decline in bee populations. They're hearing about the decline in bird populations. And everybody's like, what can I do on a personal level? And I think that's really what's inspired the movement. I think other times, too, it's like people are looking for maybe less input into their yard, meaning I don't want to have to spray chemicals. I don't want to have to spray, insecticides and put down fertilizer and water all the time.
Beyond saving resources, what else do you think people are interested in incorporating into their lawns with these new native prairies?
Well, first of all, they want easy. They want plants that are going to do well without, having to water them all the time and, baby them, if you will. And I think one thing people learn with this type of gardening is it takes a little more patience, like 2 or 3 years. I call it the garden of anticipation. You're always anticipating for next year.
Aldersgate is a very diverse garden too, because when somebody walks through here, they can walk through this tunnel of trees, kind of leading them through a path. There's rain gardens here and little wetland species that show up with that. And there's a natural materials playground for kids.
Yeah, it's definitely a community garden. It's the type of thing where you could, if you live nearby, certainly walk here. But I think it's a destination. If you create a landscape that's inviting, more nature-based landscape, you'll find yourself hanging out outside more often. Yeah, it's very inviting.
Very inviting. I keep hearing that word, inviting. That's inviting.
I like that word.
Yeah, encouraging people to come visit this place.
Yeah, exactly.